you have to do what is right and good and going to move you forward in your life and your business and your podcast. And nobody else can tell you how to do that but you. And yes, you can listen to other people and get ideas, but it has to come down to you making a decision because you're the one who's going to have to do it. Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Today we have something a little different. It is a bonus episode with one of my favorite people in the world, Lisa Zawrotny. We are talking about the importance of putting your mental health first before podcasting or productivity or all of the different things that life kind of throws at us. And we've been seeing some really disturbing trends that have caused us to kind of take a second and say, whoa, what's going on? Why are people feeling so overwhelmed or like they have to do it all? And we do not subscribe to that here. So I'm so excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be really beneficial, especially as we get closer to May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and really just allowing us to focus on what is actually going to work to grow our business, to grow our podcast, to live a more fulfilling life. So I hope you enjoy this episode. It will be aired on both my podcast and Lisa's as a bonus episode. And I hope that you find some value there. Make sure you come hang out with me on Instagram and let me know that you listened or if you have any additional thoughts.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Zawrotny, the host of the Positively Living podcast. And I'm the founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity and accountability coach for multi-passionates trying to balance business and family, avoid that burnout, and just uncomplicate lives, right? And it's time to talk about something really important.
Yes. And I'm Alicia Galati. I am the host of the Listeners to Leads podcast and CEO of Galati Media, which is a full-service podcast management company. I talked to Lisa. Lisa's one of my favorite human beings in the whole world. And we were voxing back and forth after I'd been seeing some very disturbing trends in my clients and some things that they were dealing with that I was like, what is happening? What's going on? And we need to talk about this.
Yeah, and it became a combined effort here because Alicia was like, I'm seeing this happening. And I'm like, really? Because I kind of was seeing my own version of it, but I didn't realize that it was so prevalent and to the extent that it was. So yeah, the Voxers went back and forth and I basically self-invited to have this conversation together because the more that we can talk about this, the better it is. So let's all get in this conversation. Let's share this conversation. Let's have it together because we need to make some changes. So you want to share what you've seen?
Yes. So I had one client reach out and say that a podcast production person, podcast producer, reached out to her on LinkedIn and wrote her a list of all of the things that she was doing wrong with her podcast. And obviously I was like, ho, 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 ho. Okay, no, you're not doing things wrong. She was feeling very overwhelmed and they had said things like, you need to put your podcast on YouTube. And I said, with the way that you do your podcast, no, that shouldn't be on YouTube. You don't just want to put a still frame and your voice behind it. That doesn't convert well on YouTube and it doesn't work. It doesn't help you in any way. And it's just going to be more work for you that isn't going to give you any benefits. I had another client realize, she'd been doing 2 podcasts every single week for about 5 months and came to a point where she was stressed out. She was burnt out, definitely on the road to burnout, felt very overwhelmed and was like, what are my options? Can I go down to 1 episode a week? And I said, absolutely. There is no right or wrong way to podcast. There's no right or wrong way to show up for your audience, except the wrong way would be to keep going if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed out. And I think that's why so many people stop podcasting, is because they overcommit in a way that just doesn't work for them. And then it just feels like too much work. And then the third thing I saw was a client who came to me and said, look, Alicia, I know we have a little more time left on our contract, but I'm going through this thing and it's in my personal life to the point where I cannot even coach my clients. I'm having people reach out who want to pay me money and I can't. Like, I just cannot show up for these people without first dealing with this trauma that's surfacing. And so on the podcast side, I'm also feeling like I don't know that I can show up here for the podcast. And I said, no problem. Like, your mental health comes first and foremost. And it's not a problem at all if we put your podcast on hold until or if you are ever ready to come back. Like, full permission to take care of yourself.
Yes. And I mean, this is what I coach all the time. So you're talking about a bunch of different things. One, all right, so when life happens and you don't have the bandwidth, you have to redistribute your resources. And that means removing things. It doesn't mean removing them forever, but it means it's a not right now. It means hitting pause. And the fact that they did that is so wise and so brave and so amazing. And we need to honor that so much more. Then the idea of 2 episodes a week freaks me out. And I told you that. I was like, what? Like, how? And you know what? That goes back to habits. And I'm talking about that all the time. You start as you mean to go on. Mm-hmm. You have to take small steps that you say, I can do that. And so we get excited, I think, right? And we jump into it, or, well, we're going to get into the other reasons why. But by the way, that the whole, here's what you're doing wrong thing.
Yeah.
That like irks me on a whole different level, because number one, is that any way to get clients? That's horrible. And two, why is it that the people with the worst advice are the loudest?
Oh, yes. Yeah, let's go through each of these, because I feel like there's definitely things that we can pull from each. So looking at the first one, where this service provider reached out as business owners, and like most of your audience, they're multi-passionate business owners. My audience are business owners using their podcast. And so this is a great conversation to have. As business owners who are serving others, whether that is through coaching or through our services or our courses, our memberships, whatever, when you energetically try to push yourself onto a relationship with a client like this, in this way, where you reach out and say, here's what you're doing wrong. If that client says, okay, yes, I want to work with you, they are going to be one of the most needy clients on the face of the planet. You are approaching it energetically from a place of not great, like it's not good energy. And then their energy back is not going to be fulfilling or aligned with you, especially if you're a listener to our shows, right? Because we tend to attract good people who are looking to do things correctly. And this is just not going to create a relationship that's going to work in a long-term way.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting out by insulting them, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And, you know, people have done that to me in a different way. They've slid into my Instagram DMs and be like, you could have a bajillion people here and you're not. And this is how I can help you. And I'm like, did you even ask me if I wanted a bajillion people here? Do you even know me? No, you don't. But I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's an energetic exchange of if you show up insulting someone and they're like, oh, okay, then you've immediately set a precedent for the kind of relationship that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. This is the distinction. I'm sorry, bros, because I like bros and bromances, but bro marketing versus the ethical marketing, which, you know, as you know, I've had multiple episodes on my podcast about, and the idea of allowing your potential clients to advocate for them to make the best choice. But to your point, even beyond all that, you are establishing a particular kind of relationship. And also, too, on the side of those who are receiving this information, they may be used to that kind of, you're doing this wrong. Maybe they grew up with parents who were like, that's the wrong way to do it, right?
Yep.
Or spouses, sometimes that happens where it's like, oh, you want help, but then if you tell them, nope, don't do it that way, then they're going to stop loading the dishwasher. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's going to get to the point where, like, if you look at relationships in general, right? When you are a helper or a fixer kind of person, and that, like, I tend to be a fixer, but I don't want to push my fixing on people who don't want to be, like, who don't need help, right?
Right.
Like, and that's why I tend to work with people who want to give me all the things instead of people who are like nitpick and want like little bitty parts of their process. And I understand that about myself. And I'm very clear about that expectation with my potential clients of like, look, if you want to hand it all over, great. Let me do my awesome thing. If not, it's not going to be a fit because our energies aren't going to work that way. So you can approach it as a fixer and still have good relationships with clients. But if you approach it with someone who is always wanting to be fixed and who they're going to be so over the top needy that it's not going to be fun for anyone. And I mean, what's the point if we're not having fun other than making money too? Yeah.
Yeah, but you can do that in a much more positive way.
Yeah.
I'm a helper who helps helpers, and my whole point is to advocate for them. So allowing yourself to be told you're doing it wrong, instead, how about someone approaches you with curiosity and says, are you getting the results that you want? Is this working for you? As I do have some ideas, let's talk about it. You deserve that kind of treatment. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's first and foremost, that's number one. Now, number two, that overcommitment. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about where that comes from.
Yeah, I think it comes from a place of comparing apples to oranges from like a very base level, comparing people's highlights to your life and like what we see online, what we see other people doing. And that's why I constantly am saying on my show and to my clients, you're not Joe Rogan and you don't need to be Joe Rogan. Like, you don't have to do everything that someone different or a celebrity is doing. You don't need to do those things. Do what works for you instead of saying, oh, this person has X amount of downloads or this person hit X charts. Okay. Can we talk about the charts for a second? Charts don't mean anything in podcasting. Someone can say they are a top 10 international podcast, and 2 years ago, they might have hit top 10 in Brazil, and they can use that and say international top 10 podcast. Like, it's still ethical for them to say that, like, hey, this is what I got. But then you start comparing your brand new podcast with what they got. And it's like, that's not how it works. So understanding first, like, what do I want with my podcast, with my business, with my life? How is it that I want to show up? And what is going to work best for me? And to your point earlier, for long term or however long you want to do this thing.
Exactly. I appreciate you using my podcast stats in this example. I'm kidding. But, you know, you never know what people are saying. So absolutely don't compare everyday life to other people's highlight reels. And so there's that comparison element. There's also the element, which ties back to number one, where people are coming at you all the time. We got information everywhere. This is do it this way, do it this way. This is how you're going to get results. And sometimes when you're new or you are trying to get certain results, it's an instinctive approach to be like, all right, let me try that. Mm-hmm. Check in with yourself first. And this is where I'm big on coaching not only your self-awareness, but habits. We talk about habits all the time. What we're talking about with a podcast is the habit of showing up consistently. And as you said, what works for you is going to work. So if it's once a month or once a week, if it is twice a week, go you. But I mean, you know, you're not producing Entrepreneur on Fire there. You know,
yeah.
It's like, this is your show and your conversation to be had. As long as your audience knows what to expect, it can be whatever interval, if you will, that you want it to be. And you can also change it. You can change your mind. You can change what you need to do. And I use the example when we were Voxering of Brene Brown. Okay. And again, I realize we just said, you're not Joe Rogan. And so I know we're not Brene Brown, but in this case, I want you to take some inspiration from her, where she was like, something's off. I need to step back, and I'm communicating this to you. Her audience was like, okay, we'll be here when you get back. And I've seen it with other people too. I've worked with people. I know people personally who have said, I'm taking a break, or the season is closed for right now and I'll be back in a few months. And everyone's like, okay, we're excited for when you come back, because that's what your true audience will be. They'll support you, and then they'll be ready to return when you do.
Exactly. To the point of figuring out what works best for you. This is why I am constantly saying on my show, know thyself. Know how you like to plan, how you like to talk, how you like to present things. There is no right way. Like, yes, there are strategies and tips and tricks and things you can do, but it always boils down to what is going to work best for you. So know from your perspective, from what it is that you're trying to create, what is going to work. So like I had one client say, look, we take the month of December off every year from our business, and that is just what we do. So we're going to do that with the podcast. And you know what? Let's take the month of June off too for the podcast. So that way it gives us about 5 months in here, 5 months in here, and we break it up into seasons. Nobody's freaking out. Like, it's fine. All they did was simply say, all right, we're going to take this break. This is what's happening, informed their audience, and their stats went down a little bit in January, but everybody's stats went down a little bit in January. So it doesn't even matter. And then they had a bunch of stuff that they were doing in January that ended up helping their stats toward February. But it's about really just saying, hey, look, this is free content. This is how I'm going to show up with it. And you're either along for the ride or you're not really going to be our people. And that's okay too. The average American who listens to podcasts typically listens to about 9 shows a week. So like, it's okay. They've got other stuff to listen to. You are not disappointing anyone by reducing the amount of shows that you're doing, or by saying, hey, look, I need a mental health check. And I told this client, I said, there's a way to spin this. You're talking to women who are at midlife, who are figuring out their lives, whether it is they now are empty nesters or they're having a career change and they're like, where do I kind of fit here? Their bodies are changing. So you can use this. Use your experience to create content about like, hey, if you're feeling this, it's okay to step back or to reduce what you're doing and show up for you. It is okay. There are so many different ways to use your experiences, to share it with your audience. And I think it also allows you to be more human. You put your heart and your soul into your show. And I want to help you reach all of those potential listeners out there. That's why I'm excited to announce my upcoming podcast marketing workshop. It's about giving you practical tools to grow your audience. You'll learn the secrets to getting your podcast discovered, attracting your dream listeners, and boosting those download numbers. This workshop will be hosted live with a replay available on April 30th. You can sign up by going to galatimedia.com/workshop. Let's grow our podcasts together.
Which, first of all, that vulnerability, I know it can be challenging, but it's proven that it increases your likability. Mm-hmm. The more I tell people what a hot mess productivity coach I am, the more they like me because I'm keeping it real. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was just on another podcast where she was like, okay, but what doesn't go right for you? Because everyone's going to expect you got the day set. And I'm like, I have everything down to a T, and I'm still screaming at my kids and yanking them out to the car to get them to school almost every morning. Okay. It's a real thing. Share that. So the other thing that has come to me, it's a concern that I want to keep bringing up that we have to own is what's feeding into this idea that we have to be there and we have to be there at this certain level. It's not only this idea of if you want to be successful, you do this, but it's also that not enoughness that we're constantly being fed. It is perpetuated by marketing.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time. And you aren't pretty enough. You aren't thin enough. You aren't this enough, fill in the blank enough. And here is the solution. So that's marketing right there. And it's that feeling too, like, well, the identity, right? So, and I see this all the time, the busy versus productive, because if I'm not doing a thing, then I'm not bringing value. I'm not of value. I'm not enough. And so that puts them right in the busy trap where they're constantly trying to push. That's the hustle culture. I thought we were making some headway, but I feel like it keeps, every time I'm out, they pull me back in. It's like, what's going on here? You see it too, right?
Absolutely. I actually just saw someone post on Instagram this morning. This woman I follow, she said it was a reel, and she was saying how she grew up in a very busy household, and where if you weren't doing something, whether to clean the house or reading or like doing your homework or helping with chores, and especially coming from a big family, I totally understand this, and being the oldest in a big family. If you weren't constantly doing something, then your worth is less. And I think that a lot of this, like we bring it in, like our childhood stuff and the ways that we've been taught and have grown into, tends to weave into our adulthood, right? And so it's a general idea of like, okay, how can I do better? How can I be better? How can I, all right, keep moving? But sometimes doing better and being better is resting. And I don't think people talk about that enough.
Yeah, well, I talk about it plenty, which is why we're having this conversation. We want to keep shining a light on this idea of how rest is productive, how saying no is productive, how taking time for you, it's paramount. But I do think there's this identity connection. Mm-hmm. So we think as moms, as entrepreneurs, if we are these things, we need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And so I think in your case, you see podcasters are like, well, if I'm a podcaster, I have to be, I should, all those words, those are red flags right there. As soon as you say to yourself, I have to, I should, stop for a moment and then ask the question, why?
Yep. My kids, my 7-year-old has been doing that lately. Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And then, it gets to the point where I'm like, because we need to get out the door. Well, why? Because we need to get to this place. Well, why? Because we have these plans to do. Why? Because I want you to have a great life. Why? Because I love you. Why? Because you're my child. Why? Oh my gosh.
Well, and then that leaves to because I said so.
Right.
And then we have circular logic. So I apologize for that. But mom life, hashtag.
Exactly. But I think even if you just approach things with like 3 to 5 whys, right? Mm-hmm. Like, why do I have to record a podcast every week? Does that actually work for my life, or do I need to batch this? Why do I have to show up on Instagram? I do not show up on Instagram. And I know you like to hang out over there, but I tend to, my business is based mostly on referrals. And so I like to focus my energy and time on serving the clients I have because my referrals are great. And so that's where I focus. Yes, I create some Instagram content, but it's very few and far between. And I go there to hang out and look at books.
And watch my reels.
And watch your reels. Your reels are always awesome. Everybody go follow Lisa and look at her reels. They're great.
Okay, but to this point, you just expressed so beautifully knowing thyself, right? Mm-hmm. Now, for me, also too, lest we get confused by this, I do hang out on Instagram because I love it. Yeah. And also, I am quite a bit referral based, but I also make a lot of relationships on Instagram. I love it there. I have fun. And it's where I'm most inspired to create content. So that's why I go there, like the reels. We joke about it, but seriously, I wouldn't be doing that on Twitter or on Facebook, anywhere else. That's where I like to be. So those are the kinds of things that you need to choose. And what that ties back to is the fact that sometimes when we're new, when we're tired, when we are confused, maybe our energy's low, we have this tendency to be like, somebody just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
It's understandable. But when we look outward for decisions that are key to how we're living our lives and running our businesses, it's going to trap us.
Ugh. I agree 100%. And when I started my business and was like, look, this is what I'm going to do full time, I unfollowed so many people because I knew that I would get trapped into the comparison and I wouldn't be able to grow my business the way that I wanted to grow it because everyone was saying an agency model doesn't work. You're not going to make money with an agency model. You're not going to be paid enough from an agency model. Service providers don't get paid enough. You need to create courses. And I got trapped into that in the beginning. And I was like, what are you doing, Alicia? First of all, you have a degree in business and marketing. So what are you doing? You know what you need to do here. But it's so easy to be like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Somebody tell me what to do with my hands. But you can't. You have to do what is right and good and going to move you forward in your life and your business and your podcast. And nobody else can tell you how to do that but you. And yes, you can listen to other people and get ideas, but it has to come down to you making a decision because you're the one who's going to have to do it.
It all comes down to you making the best choices for you. And so then here we have the decisions that you're making that you know what's right for you. And then those are your boundaries and you protect those boundaries. And like anything else, when you decide, right, when you make a choice, it's so powerful because then you're like, well, then this is how it's going to look. And this is where it's going to be on the calendar. And this is what I need. And this is when I'll be here. And this is when I'm available for the rest of you. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, maybe even more, everyone else will line up and be like, okay.
Yep. I saw one friend of mine. She has potential client calls one day out of the month. And I was so inspired by that. I didn't go that extreme, but I started at the time. I was like, I'm doing so much client work and I'm on calls all the time. And yes, it's great to meet new people and, talk to potential people, but I'm at the point where I can't function. And so I took 2 weeks off every month where I wasn't taking calls. And then I found that I missed people. So that didn't work for me. And I tested it and I tried it and I was like, yep, nope, that doesn't work. So now I take every Monday and Friday where I don't have any calls. It allows me to ease into my week. And then Tuesdays are great. We have our team meetings. We kind of start off the week that way. And then ending with client calls usually on like Thursdays. And so I'm able to kind of divvy out where I know when I can have my focus work. I know when I can work on certain things. And it helps me structure my life better to the point where now I have this structure. It works and I'm good. But I had to kind of tweak it and figure out what was going to work for me. And I think that's where people get stuck. They're like, oh, this doesn't work. I'm trash. It's trash. Everything's trash.
I laugh at that, but it's so true. And you just had such a great episode with Emily Aborn, and you were talking about that. Like, how do you make adjustments? And it's like, well, you think about what's working already and what you've put into it, and then you course correct as opposed to just tossing it all out. And that's what's happening here. Mm-hmm. So just a reminder too, and this is what you and I started talking about in the first place, or the concern that like brought us to this conversation, is the fact that when you constantly go outward, when you let others tell you what to do, when you have these unrealistic expectations that were given to you, and so you're going with it. And you have this identity that says, well, if I'm a podcaster or if I'm, fill in the blank of whatever it is you're trying to do, and that I must do these things, I have to, I should, that's going to lead to burnout and is going to break you down. And then everything does become trash because you can't do it anymore. And that's devastating. And it happens way too often. So that's why you want to change the way you're approaching this and take these tips. What you're describing that I absolutely love is this idea of creating patterns and themes where you play with the boundaries a bit. I do something similar where I go for 1 week of collaboration calls because I talk to people who are going to be in my podcast. And as you know, I have such a huge amount of people requesting that now that's a little bit overwhelming for me. So I keep that narrow, but I keep other connection calls with potential clients and coaching and stuff like that. That's more frequent. And I also love doing like theme days, like Thursdays are my podcasting day, and all the things podcast related happen then. Now, the thing with themes, the things with the patterns that you're talking about is that you set it up so that you have a natural ebb and flow, that you manage your expectations and everyone else's. But guess what? You get to choose if you want to change it up. We are not recording this on a Thursday for me. Doesn't matter because this was something special. So you set the rule first, then you get to break it.
Yes. And you get to decide what breaks it, and you don't have to let anyone else decide that. So I had a client say, hey, look, the only time I can meet is on Wednesday night. And is that okay? And like, my only late nights are Thursday nights in the week. That's where I have extended hours for international clients. And it was going to be a one-off thing because we were trying to prepare for a launch. And so it wasn't going to be a consistent thing. And I reconnected with my husband, said, hey, look, I know we had this plan to watch a movie or whatever during this time. I'm going to swap my days, close out that Thursday night, and instead have it Wednesday night as open. And that ended up being my only call that Wednesday. And it was fine. It worked, right? So like, to your point, make the rule and then allow yourself to break it or shift it. But you get to choose. I could have just said, hey, look, that time doesn't work for me. We need to figure out a different time. But it's really just up to you to say, okay, boundary, here we go. And then how do I want to show up for that?
Right. And as the seasons of your life change, as your goals maybe shift, or, you get to change because it's going to happen regardless. So you might as well lean into it and say, well, things are going to change. So I might as well keep paying attention to what it is that I need during these changes and make the choice that's best. Classic example that you're talking about with working in the evening. I help so many people not overextend themselves, which you frequently think of as, oh, you're working at night, you're working constantly. That's not always the case. Again, it just needs to be intentional. I do work in the evening, but only a couple nights a week, but for two really important reasons. One, I pick up my children from school. That's a big part of, that's when I get all the really juicy details about like daily life. You know what I mean? On the ride back and forth. This is something that I want to do for them. And so because classic, school car pickup line is like a mile long, right? Okay. I have to head out early. I use that time to listen to podcasts like Listeners to Leads. And I use that time to do things that are just for me, that are quiet time. And I wait for them, but it's a big chunk of time in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So that's a big chunk of time that's taken away from me being able to work with clients and do different things like that. But it's important to me. So having a few nights a week works out. The other thing too is I work internationally as well. And I have an oddly large amount of people from Australia, but I love it. It's fabulous. And so given that, it allows me to connect with people across the globe. So, it's not every single day. My family understands it, and we make adjustments accordingly with our meal planning and everything else that goes with it.
Yes, I agree 100%. I also tend to work nights because that's when my brain functions best as well.
Yeah.
I am not a morning person. And so the idea of doing certain types of work in the morning, it just doesn't work for me. If I just can copy and paste stuff, then I'm fine. But if it's me actually trying to create something or create something unique or original, then I need my night brain for that. And so I know that about myself. And so Tuesdays and Thursdays are my night times that I tend to work. But Thursdays, I allow myself to have calls then. And I don't, most of the time, most weeks, I don't have any evening calls. And that works fine for me, but I at least have that available, to your point, for either my West Coast clients or my international clients. And my husband knows, like, Tuesdays, don't bother me. Like, they're busy days. But Monday morning, you want to go mow? Sure, I'll watch our youngest while our older one is in school. And, like, I have that flexibility with that. And, like, it just adds to your point of seasons, right? Like, I know that my kids are going to be homeschooled next year. Don't know why my husband's doing it, but that's a different point. That he wants to do it. That's great. I would not do it. No, thank you. And so I'm looking at, okay, do I need to redo my room to be more soundproof? Because I know that I can get distracted and my mom antenna goes off. Do I need to shift the times that I'm going to be available for calls? Summer months are coming. How do I need to shift my life there as a parent, as a business owner, as someone who's working out of my house, like many people right now? There are so many things that can come up that we have to allow ourselves space to ease into the ebbs and flows of whatever it is that life is kind of handing us at the moment.
Yeah, it's so true. Transitions are another big one. So we have transitions in seasons. We have transitions in the different things that we do. I love that you talked about knowing when your brain is fired up more, when you are more creative. All of these things, these points of self-awareness. What do you value? I talked about the fact that I want to be there to pick up my kids. That's something I truly value. It's important to me. And again, we can get in a trap easily, like as a mom, you need to do that. No, actually I don't.
Yeah.
But as a mom, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So allow yourself to step into what really lights you up, where you work best. That's, all the things that you're describing, the stuff that I'm describing is knowing yourself so that you can make the choices of where you work best and to keep you as healthy as possible. When we first started talking about this, mental health was a term that we were using repeatedly because when you don't play to your strengths, when you are out of alignment and you are not living your values, when you are living by somebody else's code of ethics and you are trying to do things that don't feel right and don't feel like doable to you, goodness, the impact that it has on you, it not only burns you out physically and mentally, but emotionally, because one of the first instincts that we have when things don't go well is, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Breaks my heart.
I think about like when my kid is creating like a Lego car or something, right? And it's like, you're following the instructions, but it's not working out the way you said. Where did I go wrong? Like that is the initial thought. Maybe the instructions are wrong. Oh my gosh, gasp. Can we think about that for a second? Maybe the instructions that you're basing what you should, I got like massive quotation bunny ears here, what you should do, maybe the playbook is wrong. And you need to make your own playbook, and that's okay.
Maybe you're missing pieces. Ever thought of that? Because I feel like this metaphor is going to go somewhere fun.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah. And that's the first thing that I say. I'm like, okay, so let's establish some ground rules here. First of all, we're not going to talk anything like, specific efficiency, productivity related until we figure out what you value and who you are as a person. And secondly, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault. We need to find the places where we fit the best. And, why is it that we don't want to do this? Because it feels too easy and then therefore it doesn't have value. What's up with that?
Oh my goodness. A bunch of trash.
Another story. Right?
It
Come
really
on.
is. That life can't have easy seasons or that you're not doing enough because it's easy. And it's like sometimes things are just because you've worked your butt off for them, they get easier. And that's awesome. Like,
because you've been practicing, because this is what you are all about. It's like when people are like I should there's that should word, but but I don't mean this actually. I mean, like hypothetically, I should be thinking, what's wrong because podcasting came easy? Well, okay. I have a background in voice work and I've taken courses on communication and I've practiced. I mean, before I started my podcast, I had gratitude conversations like repeatedly with people in a group where we practice gratitude together. There were lots of little things that I did to build to that point. So I just think that the whole one hit wonder thing, and it's like the whole or overnight, I think is really more what I'm thinking of. It's an overnight, like hit. And it's like not overnight, maybe over decades.
Yes. It's like, oh, well, that just took you. That's one reason why they say like service providers charge not just for the amount of time that it takes you to accomplish something, but for all the experience that you're bringing into it, right?
Yeah.
It didn't just take you 10 minutes to transfer someone over like one document from one platform to another. It took you years of figuring it out. like, and learning and doing it and getting good at it. And that's what you should be looking at rather than, oh, well, it just takes me 10 minutes. It doesn't take 10 minutes for somebody else.
Exactly. If you look at what we do in strategy calls, and in case in point, when I come to you for a strategy call and I've got these questions, because I always got questions, and I can see in your mind, you're like going through, the list of articles that you've read and things that you've researched and information that you've gathered to benefit your clients. And you're like, okay, I read something where this is actually the better way to do it. I don't recommend that because you have this list. Like, so sure, we strategize this, in a half an hour, but that was so much time and effort and experience that you brought to the table to do it that quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Jess, my executive assistant, she's always on that call and she's like, sometimes I just watch you and I'm like, how does she know that? It's like, it's been years of just so much information. And I think that's to the point also of like, people see me and they're like, oh, Alicia had this multi-six-figure business in a year. Wow. And it's like, it didn't take me a year. Like, I started this pivot a year ago, but I was doing it 5 years before then in different capacities to the point where now I'm able to bring all that information and say, okay, this is how we're going to make it work. And this is my zone of genius. And here's how I want to show up. But when I first started my business, I was with the whatever everybody else was doing and what's working and the get rich quick schemes. And my poor husband had to hear all of them. Like, all these ideas of things that I'm going to do. I'm going to make $1 million and it's going to be great. And none of that panned out the way that I thought it was going to be until I was like, you know what? Forget what they're doing. I'm going to do it my way. And that worked.
And that's the thing. I did the same thing. I started off and I was like, okay. I mean, I did have the benefit in a way, and it sounds odd to say this, and I've mentioned this to you before, of having been through some really difficult times, being a caregiver, and there was a lot of trauma and a lot of grief. And that was enough to teach me a lesson in bandwidth.
Yeah.
And to be able to say, okay, great. Y'all are out there doing these incredible things and complicated email marketing and all that kind of stuff. I pretty much know I can't do that. What can I do? So that helped me into essentially what I coach now, which is what can you do? But it's still so easy to get swept up in what everybody else is claiming. But for the sake of our health and for the sake of making our effort effective, it needs to be protecting ourselves, listening to ourselves, knowing ourselves first.
Yes. Your mental health is more important than whatever else it is that you're trying to accomplish, because you're not going to be able to accomplish it if you burn yourself out. That is a fact. It's not going to happen. And if you want to accomplish things, then you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your body. Otherwise, what's the point?
And it's true. And, the other thing too, listen, I've come back from burnout. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm there to support people who do. However, like anything in life, trying to come back from that versus maintaining and taking care of yourself along the way, the effort required for one versus the other is significantly different.
Yeah. And we're not just saying, go have a spa day or go treat yourself. Like, yes, I'm all about treating yourself. Do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And figure out where your boundaries are and stick to them and what's going to work for you, and getting help from people who want to help you and support where you can, because that's going to make it easier for you. And easy isn't bad. It's not.
Exactly. And working with coaches and service providers who understand that your limits and can help you maximize everything that you're doing. You deserve to have success, do it in a way that feels right for you, and actually, sometimes feels easy. How about that? Because it's called being in flow, and it's the best thing ever.
Yes, 100%. I feel like we've talked about everything. Is there anything else that we...
No, I think that's it. The bottom line, as Alicia said, your mental health, your health, you are more important than any other goal, any other task, any other project that you have in mind. So honor that. Honor you.
Where can people find you, Lisa, for anyone who's listening on my show or on your show who's like, hey, wait a minute, I need to connect with you guys?
You can always find me at positivelyproductive.com, or we talked about Instagram. That's where I like to play, positively_Lisa, and of course, the Positively Living podcast. And we do talk about a lot of this stuff on the podcast. So keep listening to other episodes because this is where it's at. And how about you, Alicia?
Yes. So you can find me at listenerstoleads.com. You can find the podcast there as well as all of my other stuff. And I do like to connect on Instagram, though I don't hang out on there too much, but I like when people slide in my DMs. That always makes me happy. So you can find me at alicia.galati on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia, for having this conversation with me and helping me shine a light on something that's so important.
Yes. Thank you to you as well, because I think we both bring some very unique perspectives and are in alignment with like, yes, this conversation needed to happen. So thank you as well. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.